Yeah, I'm Patrick Thaden, and with me right now is Wade Allen. We are going to be discussing a video that I came across a bunch of years ago, um, almost 20 years ago now, I think. Yeah, 20,
Something like that. Yeah.
19, 20 years ago, I came across a video maybe. And I was looking for a different video on copper workers in Mexico that I had seen an article on in a video clip years ago. And I came across an old sorry, let me back up. There was a website I found on the internet. It was a German website. This was back in early 2000s. And I came across a description of a video that they had. It's a company that holds anthropological videos and various old historical documenting stuff. And this description, there was no video, there was no pictures, nothing. It was just a description. And the description goes, working on a forge whose origins date back to the 17th century, the father and sons of an artisan family of Bieno in the province of Brescia, northern Italy, manufacture metal buckets for brickwork. They work with slabs of reusable iron, which are heated in a furnace adapted to naphtha oil firing. The draught for blowing the furnace is created by an ancient system based on the fall of water. The process begins with the preparation of the material. An iron slab is shaped to the form required for a container mold into which flat beaten out iron plates are inserted 7 at a time. The batch is then heated and pounded into bucket form by water-powered drop hammer. After shearing and finishing, the buckets are fitted onto sides with handles and stacked one inside the other. The final product is much wider at the drop than at the bottom, a shape traditionally used for conveying mortar and other light building materials. So this description is what really caught my attention because it was in Bieno, which is only a couple hours north of Brescia, my major armor producing center. And they were using water-powered drop hammers in a place that dated to at least the 17th century, is what it said. Yeah, 17th century. And so it's one of those, okay, well, that's kind of the end of armor by then. So it's like, what do you do with this technique of making helmets and armor plates? What are you going to do if nobody wants armor? It's like, well, make buckets. So, I mean, we've seen armor repurposed for buckets. So, why not? So I risked it. I spent $70 on this video, had to wait 2 months for a VHS copy of this tape to get mailed to me from Germany. And I was not disappointed. And so I've shared this with a few people over the years. Wade has seen it before, and he's always got great insights into metal forming and pushing and techniques that people don't normally think about using today. So it'll be fun to discuss this video with him. I'm going to go ahead and let's see. I'll go ahead and get the video started here if I can figure out how. Let's see. Share screen. Okay, let's make this bigger. Oh, it cut us out. Hang on.
It looks like I see it up there.
There we go.
We're
cut
around
me out, so I couldn't see us. Okay, so I've skipped past the very introduction where they show some pretty water stuff falling and an overview of the city. I had heard this was shot in the 1970s, but I may be mixing it up. Wade thinks it was probably earlier than that, and it very well could be. It could be the copper working video that was from the 70s. There is no audio to this, so we're going to be the narrators. Let's see. So this is just panning around, coming into the shop here. I'll jump inside here in a second. So this is the guy, he's preparing or getting the plates ready. And you can see, I mean, huge stack. They're all square, rectangular-ish, various sizes here. Picking out a few that he likes. I don't know if you're able to catch. It's a little hard to make out thicknesses, but in general, they're probably around 1/4 to 5/16 inch thick. I did have a chance to go and visit the town and see this place, and so that's talking from experience there.
And it doesn't look like there's any specific size.
No, I mean, that one's more rectangular.
Yeah, they're working on having the right weight in each thing, really.
Yeah, I mean, you can see a smaller one there, some bigger ones, big long one there. So yeah, it's kind of all over the place. Love the giant tongs. Get way inside the furnace. Don't have to worry about burning off arm hair.
That would be good with this size furnace. And they're shoving a bunch of them in there at once and just let them all get hot.
So here they're just swapping out dies for the hammer. The anvils on these things are about 3 feet tall, 3.5 feet tall. I say tall. I mean, it looks like he's sitting on the ground there. They actually bury him in the ground and set him on top of about, I don't remember. It's a huge granite block. They dig like an 8 foot deep hole, 9 foot deep hole, something like that. Put in a huge granite block and then set the anvil on top of it. No dovetails. Everything's just wedged in.
Well, there's a lot of pressure, so it'll generally tighten up as it hits.
Yeah.
So, and they're not working with a massive amount of speed, so it'll work.
Yeah. I mean, you can see here, this is tapered the opposite direction from how we view most hammers today. There's a lot of fun little things in this video that don't really relate to metalwork, I guess. One of them's coming up here in a second. So these were controlled by two people, typically the guy off to the right there, and then the guy that sits in front of the hammer. See, this is one of the fun things, the big hammer here.
Subtle adjustments require subtle tools.
Yeah, if you look at the hammer, they're slightly offset, the hammer and the anvil, and so they're tightening up wedges, and they're going to set and realign the hammerhead with the anvil underneath. So I've gotten pictures of one of these hammers, and it's longer than 12 inches overall. Just I've got my foot setting on top of it. I don't know how many pounds that thing is. I think I might have asked at the time, but I don't recall. But I've got a 22-pound sledge, and this is substantially larger than a 22.
Just the little hammer they're using for adjustment.
Yes.
The actual hammer they're going to use as a trip is massive.
Yeah. So here, I mean, you can see in the background. Oh, I jumped off. I'm not going to try and back this up. If we really need to, I'll back it up, but let's just roll through for a second.
So there it's actually tripping. It's a trip hammer.
Yeah.
So what the name comes from. Water
So
driven.
this shop is still in existence. It's kind of a working museum at this point. So people can still go and visit it. The town, apparently in the 17th century, had a flood come through and wipe out all their hammer mills. And so that's why this is dated to the 17th century, because everything they had prior to the 17th century got wiped out in the flood that came through. I had heard at the time, I don't recall now when I went to visit, how many hammer mills they had at one point, but dozens and dozens of them. There's water runs down all through the area.
Right. And
so here,
time, water was what you used to provide power.
Yeah, see, they jump past some of the fun parts. It's like, okay, show the metal. Come on, back to the metal. Okay, here we go. So here he's got one of the plates, and he's got basically a fullering type die. So a long, narrow hammerhead, not a round or just big square. And they're taking the plates and they start drawing them out in the first step. You can see in the background, there's a bunch of plates off to the right here, all stacked up. So, I mean, he's been going for a little while. The guy that's shooting the video obviously was not worried about all the details that we would like to see.
No, of course not. But functionally, at this stage, he's using it, and we can see how much of a cross peen it is.
Yes.
From the marks.
All the little narrow, deep marks. And
right.
See if you can make it out here.
And a lot of what he's
work is happening around the edge, but he has crossed through the middle on these. But that started out as a square plate. So, I mean, he's definitely putting some stretch to it and rounding it out in the process.
Right. And you can see the angle of the things. A lot of that really is sort of making a square or a rectangle into round. Now, they're also maintaining some differential thickness. You
Yes.
You've measured one that before they messed around with it. Sort of. Where are they?
Before they messed around with it. What do you mean?
Before they made a bucket out of it. How thick is it in the middle, and how thin it is? What's the sort of what are they doing?
I think we're going to have to get back to that at the end of this and go
Okay,
through some of that stuff because it's one of those with our limits at the moment. I
that's
don't
fine.
recall off the top of my head. So we can
Okay.
pull those out and measure them. So here he's just trimming off the nasty bits that you don't need, get them out of the way. It's a water driven shear with a spring pole and a cam, which they do show here. Only the finest protective equipment. Pair of gloves there.
Yes.
So here we've got the spring pole coming down, and it's
There's
just
the cam,
it's fun.
and all driven by water. So there's absolutely no reason that this couldn't be 15th century technology, 16th century technology.
Yeah. So here he's matching them up in pairs. I was trying to catch that. He's got them stacked two at a time. So he's getting two of them that are pretty similar in size and stacking them up. And you'll see why here in a second. I don't know exactly why that one's got a number on it versus some of the others. And why that one needed to go on top and the other one underneath. There's a lot we don't know. Even talking to the guys in Bieno, there's stuff that because of translation and whatnot, it was a little difficult to make out. But you can see here he's got him kind of zigzag stacked. So what he's got here, I mean, you can see the guy's still pulling them out and they're getting ready to run a second cycle on these. This is a mixture of basically clay and water. They talked about something else being put in it, but I don't recall if they ever admitted to what it was. Somewhere I remember hearing or reading that ash could be added to it to act as a resist. Yellow
Basically,
ochre works, but in
basically, it's
experiments,
just something to keep things from sticking together.
yes. And it's one of those you would think with all the scale and oxides and nastiness that they wouldn't stick, but they will.
If you don't want them to stick, they will. If you do, they won't. Yes.
Yes. That's kind of the standard, I think. If you watch these as he's dipping them, I mean, he's not too worried about it. I mean, enough of a gap that so what? I need to keep the mouse out of the way so we can catch the bottom of the screen. What's interesting is a couple of these, when he dips them, you'll actually see them steam a whole lot, which means there you go. See all the steam rising off of that? So that last set. So they went from hammering them out to trimming them to stacking them up in pairs to they were still hot enough that they caused it to steam. I mean, these guys aren't messing around. They've got a process and they're running through it. So here, it looks like that was a single that he had set off to the side there. So now they've got two of them stacked up and they're continuing to stretch them. And he is crossing through the middle a little bit, but you can see he's kind of staying off to the edges a bit more and
Right.
rotating
This was
around. There's a bit of an angle.
This was a subtlety I missed completely. This double stack game. And from playing around with things in stacks, you're going to get a sort of more even, the center will mush together and everything won't have quite as nasty hammer marks in it. Well, on the top it will, but
Yeah.
nowhere else.
But it's one of those you can see right there on the edge. I mean, he's really just focusing out here on this outer edge at this point. When you stack them up, one of the other benefits that you get is they hold heat longer. So they aren't,
Right.
as they're getting thinner, as he's thinning the edges, you're maintaining your heat, which is
Right.
really,
That's probably the major reason they're playing the game. Once you get out to whatever it is, 16th inch or wherever they're getting, it would cool down almost immediately if it were one piece.
yes. But I mean, he's really focused on the edge. He's bringing the edge down to essentially the final thickness.
Yeah. No, that's an abusive wailing away right there at the edge.
Yeah, it's so fun.
It is fun what a big hammer will do.
It's one of those, it could be probably rather cold even, and it would still squish to some degree.
Oh, yeah.
So that was a single heat, though. I mean, you can see there. Oh, yeah, they show it again. But that's so far we're up to two heats on this. There is the heat for the single plate, and then a heat for the pair of plates. And then they go back to the trimming. You can see how lumpy this is. I mean, there is no
Oh, those
concern
are,
with trying
yeah,
to
those
keep
are
it smooth
beautiful.
and pretty.
Yeah, those that really showed the nastiness and how deep the hammer marks are. They're
Yeah.
really not worried about that at all.
So right here, he's got a whole big stack of them, and we saw them pushing in stacks before. This is a little bit different here with this set. So it's one of those, we'll talk through this, show it, and explain it with this set when he pulls them out. So this is, I've tried to count it. I wasn't able to get a good count on how many are in that. I don't think it really matters because this isn't the stack of 7 that they discuss. This is going to be the outer layer that encases the 7, essentially.
Right.
And so they aren't worried about trying to keep them all close and tight. This is just to create basically a big frying pan shape, a skillet shape.
This is creating the old pop top to be able to put on the thing. So yeah, this is a separate process that is done for the outer one only.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I would
Now they've got a
completely
round
just
shaped hammer. I have some photos which I'll show after we go through the video. Some of the pictures I took that actually show what the face of that hammerhead looks like, because it's not just a big dome, which I was a little surprised.
Right. It sure looks like a dome when you're just watching the video here.
Yeah. And it could be they have more than one, and this one is more of a dome. But the ones that I actually saw in person, I didn't see one that just had a smooth dome. So here we've got sorting going on again, and you can see, they jumped off of it again.
But he's making nice even
There you
stacks.
go. In the bottom right are the outer ones that he just kind of beat out.
Right.
He's got stacks of 7 now, that making sure everything is coated real well. It absolutely has to be coated. If you don't coat it, they will weld together.
I remember you talking about doing a sample one with pear, and you had some stick.
Yes.
Yeah.
We did an experiment with this slightly smaller scale than this. I think we did 5 is what we stacked up, but more on the order of 12-inch diameter for our finished diameter or something like that. You can see how lumpy the steel is still. There has been no concern with trying to make it pretty yet.
None.
But the stack we did, I had some really rusty, nasty iron plates, and we figured, that'll be fine. They won't stick. And we had several of them that welded, fused in the stack that it took some work to get them out. I love this beam.
I love the tool.
Press.
The tool is great.
It's just a hook. It's like, what is that hook in the floor attached to? Probably another giant chunk of granite with a metal bar stuck in it. So this is nice too. You see that stack? It's not pretty.
It's not pretty at all. They just folded it over enough to catch everything together.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, their edges hanging out. They don't care.
Yeah, it's really kind of gnarly at this point. They're figuring we're going to get it hot. We're going to hit it some more. No worries.
Well, and the outer one's really a throwaway, right?
Yes, the outer one does take some serious abuse from the furnace, and I mean you can see that's a combination of scale as well as the clay that was on the outer layers.
Right.
And these guys are just kind of getting it going in the right direction. That big dish that they're hammering into is a giant chunk of stone. So somebody carved that out just for this. So the same heat there. Just closing it up a little more. You can see in the background, look to the right of him, just behind the guy on the right. See the stacks of buckets? Hundreds and hundreds of these things.
Squared off buckets.
Everywhere. If you squint slightly, they look kind of like a helmet.
A little too square, but the concept is right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I said. You got to squint a little.
Yeah.
So this is the same heat, though. They pulled it out. They mashed it in a little bit. This is still the same heat.
And they're just wailing away on it, tilted up on a block.
Yes.
On the anvil near the edge of the plate.
If you look to his left foot, you can see an angled wedge block, but the hammer is striking down on the anvil. They're just tilting it up slightly. And he's using his foot to shove it in. Yeah. but
This
kind of
is,
working from the outside in there.
and are they just spiraling from the outside in all the time, or is there some different pattern that they're doing every now and then?
Okay, I got to stop it right here for a second. As far as spiraling in or out, I wasn't able to really get a clear idea from them. Um, how they worked from the inside to the outside. There, it looked like they had stepped it in a little bit, and then he was going back out towards the rim a little. Mac and I have talked about this, and we did some experiments and playing with different ways of kind of moving the metal in this sense on single piece playing, stretch raising stuff like this. What this video drove me nuts. I can't tell you how many times I went back and watched this segment here, because they go from that last scene where it's like, okay, there's a little bit of depth, to this, and there's a massive amount of depth, and it's like,
Right.
what did they cut out? Why? We need to see this all the way through. And so
Yes.
lots of speculation, lots of talking to you and Mac and a few other people trying to figure out what happened in between, how much time was elapsed in there. And it was one of those, until the guys in Bieno started popping up on the internet, and Aaron Sergel, he went to visit him and he talked to him a bit, and so we got a few answers from him, and then when I went, I got a few more answers. But it's one of those, it sounded like back in the day they would go from the first stage of getting it closed up to, okay, it's now under the hammer, to full depth in a single heat in about 7 or 8 minutes.
Wow.
So they're bringing up a stack of buckets in 7 or 8 minutes in a single heat. The guy that I was talking to said he's not quite as quick. He's not doing it every day, and so it might take him 15 minutes, and it might take 2 heats.
That's good enough. 15 minutes, 2 heats, 6 or 7 usable buckets.
Yeah. So I'm going to back it up. I will back this up just so we can see this little part, because you can see the ripple here, and then it looks to me, oh no, I broke the video. Oh no. Video's broken, Wade. What happened? There we go.
There he goes. There he goes.
But you can see the ripple, and you can see how he's working out towards the outer edge there a little bit.
Right. I think that's where Mac
But then it jumps to this.
The idea that they have sort of a run along the bottom, run along the sides, run along the bottom. I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of those though. Once you've gone down the sides, you can't really easily go back to the sides at this point. I mean, you could tilt the buckets to some degree, but you start striking on that awkward, crooked surface, and it's just not going to go well for you. It's going to kick those buckets around on you. You can see though how deep that stack is. I mean, it's got some depth to it. I do have pictures of these tongs as well. They do get progressively deeper tongs as they play with this stuff.
And they're sending it in for another heat. Kind of. Looks like it's off at the side.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I recall why. I was trying to remember why. I haven't watched this video all the way through in a while. And it's like, why are they doing that? Because the buckets are at full depth. Because they're making squared out buckets, they're now squaring the sides some. So he's got a big, heavy plate there, the guy on the right, and he's got it with the tongs. Yeah, you see it better here. So kind of a trapezoid-shaped piece that he's using to help square them out. So there was another heat. It wouldn't be necessary if you just wanted round buckets.
Right. And he's just, that was just barely tapping with the hammer.
Yeah. So there we've got finished stack here, and some big pinchers and a big hook in the chunk of stone there to help hold it so he can peel them apart. So he's peeling off the sacrificial layer, and you can see the edge there. He'll separate them out real nicely in a moment.
I love his hammer. And there they go. So there goes the sacrificial guy.
If you do it right, they come apart. If you don't, you have to yell at it a lot. But look at that.
Tap.
So there's your 7.
And there you go.
So I'm gonna pause it here. So one of the things that we discovered is one of those, you look at it and you go, oh, that's nice, that's fun, that's cool. When Per and I did an experiment years ago, one of the things that we realized in doing this, I mean, it's one of those, okay, I've done experiments with single plates, hammering them out of thick plate. And it's one of those, as soon as it starts getting thin, you start losing heat fast. You're losing
Right.
tons of material to scale oxidation. And you're spending way more time heating it up than you're hammering as you're trying
Right.
to expand the metal. Um, with this, you've got a stack. I think, I mean, if the centers remained full thickness at, say, a quarter of an inch, you've got 7 layers there. You've got almost 2 inches of material in the center.
Right.
And if it's thin to, say, 16 gauge out on the edges, you've got just under an inch, 15 sixteenths. Is that right? No,
Whatever. It's
seven,
close
yeah,
enough.
7
You've still
sixteenths.
got a massive amount of thickness and
Yeah.
a massive amount of heat with a relatively small surface area.
Yeah.
So relatively, you know, 2 inches thick and, 12, 14, 15 inches wide. It
Yeah.
it's a block. So
Yes.
it'll act like blacksmithing blocks, not like sheet metal.
Yeah. So it holds heat forever, so you can work it a long time. With the clay, I was thinking, okay, well, it'll help prevent oxidation and scale, which I'm sure it does. But the cool thing with the experiment we did was when we separated them, even the ones that kind of suck, we started out with rusty, nasty, just gross looking iron. When we peeled it apart, it looked like somebody had sandblasted the metal. It was bright and shiny and clean.
Wow.
The only place we saw any oxidation was right around the outer rim, and it had blued. It hadn't even built up a layer of scale out towards the outer edge. So it's one of those, there was zero material loss on all of those inner layers. Nothing was
And
lost to oxidation and scale.
wow. And that, I mean, for them, steel was important, and that's
Yeah.
valuable. That's safe because usually when I'm bashing out a, you know, hot bashing out a big thing, I'm losing massive amounts of measurable scale every time
Oh,
I
yeah.
put it in the hammer. So it's fast, it keeps the heat, you don't have to keep warming it up, and you save a lot of the oxidation. No, that's
Yes.
cool.
Yeah. I mean, I was blown away. Just, it was clean. I mean, there was nothing on it. It was beautiful. It was
Wow.
amazing.
Yeah.
So there's just so many things to stacking them up like this that it's just like, this is genius. This is brilliant. So almost 20 years ago when I came across this and showed you, it's just like, this is a big deal. I mean,
It's a really neat process, and it has just a lot of advantages. Now, it does require a big oven and a massive hammer.
yes, to
I mean, we
do
played
exactly what
around.
they're doing. Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
I mean, we played around with one at the forging, trying to do things by hand, and it worked,
yeah.
kind of. But that was a lot of work and a lot more heats, and nobody, well, everybody enjoyed the fun, but not the hammering part.
Yeah. So we're down on time, unfortunately. What they go into here is actually just making the handles. It's one of those, it's not as critical to what we found interesting.
Right.
I mean, their hammer die there is kind of interesting with how it's set up. Wait, no, it's not over. They go into planishing. I'm sorry. No, we got to
Right.
let this play through. They haven't jumped to the handles yet. So yeah, this is, I don't know. This one's interesting. I forgot about this. Like I said, it's been a little while. So
Yeah, these things happen.
what these guys typically would do, though, from my understanding, is run about a 2-week cycle. So in a 2-week span, they would start prepping blanks the first week, get everything kind of set up and cycle through so that they weren't changing out the heads all the time. Because you saw in the beginning, it took a little time to set everything up, to adjust things, to tweak things. So I guess this is like a rough blanishing, maybe.
Right. Well, having looked at the buckets you were nice enough to bring back, we can see waves in the sides.
Yeah.
They're
But this
very,
process right now, what they're
this
showing,
is fixing that. Yep.
yeah, just roughly. It's
Oh, yeah.
fun here in the next little bit when they clean them up a little more. So,
Yes. I mean, of course, you use water for your planishing hammer too.
yeah. So we got this guy trimming them up now, making the edges a little prettier.
Back to the shear.
So when I went to visit, I took pictures of these shears, and the blades were made from a large bolt of some type. At the top edge, you can't see it on this one. So this is a different shear blade. But the replacement blade that has been made since then, I guess, was just a big bolt that they mashed flat and heat treated. So this hammer here was another one that we were watching this going, okay, is this sped up? Is there what is going on here? But you can see the guy trimming and he's moving normal speed. That hammer is just it's tripping along pretty quick. And they did have this operational, this hammer, and so I was able to see it planish, and yeah, it moves pretty quick. So they've got two different hammers, one for the sides and then one for the bottom.
They need different clearances. They need to be able to reach things. That's fine.
Yeah. So the buckets that I brought back don't appear quite as large as these. When you look at
Maybe
what is
not. Yeah, the two I have vary significantly in depth. I guess either they were just different stacks, or
yeah,
one's the inner one and one's a farther out one. Mine are 5.5 to about 7 inches tall.
okay. I would suspect different stacks just because there was a whole array of different pieces, and I kind of, chatted with them and said, "Hey, can I buy a couple of these?" And kind of just grabbed a few that they said were fine to grab.
Yeah.
I kicked myself a little bit. I wish I had grabbed one of the old squared out ones that were laying around because they aren't doing them like that from what I had seen anymore.
Oh, okay.
There were some larger ones, and when I say larger, there was one that was easily 2 foot in diameter and probably 18 inches deep.
That's
A
big.
big bucket.
Yeah. Mine are between 12 and 13 wide in the
Yeah.
round.
Yeah, I've got a photo of that, which in the next bit I can share on the screen as well, and we can kind of talk through some of the other stuff. I'll just let it play out. I mean, we've probably only got 4 or 5 minutes left that we can kind of discuss, but it is fun to just kind of look at what all was going on. You see the piles of handles there and the buckets. They're much cleaner now.
They are much cleaner.
I don't know. I mean, is there anything worth jumping back to look at again real quick? I mean, it's one of those, you could go through this video dozens of times and find something new every time.
You could. I wish that gap in the middle weren't there.
Yes, yes.
That's
Aaron
what I
Sergel,
really want to stare at.
Aaron Sergel was able to get some video of them actually working on buckets. When I went to visit, they didn't have it set up to do the buckets. They had a couple of plates that they forged on and some other stuff, but they weren't really set up at that point. I mean, all the stuff was there. They weren't making buckets that day.
Right. Given the trouble it is to change out dies and hammerheads and get it all set up. I mean, as you said, they do it in stages and do it in large batches. You can't just sort of leave it set up and show people making buckets, because you spend all your time changing hammerheads.
Yeah. So one of the other things, real quick, we've just got a few minutes left. When I was looking, I wasn't looking for this video in particular. What I had been looking for was one on the coppersmiths of Santa Clara del Cobre. And something years ago, I mean, my interest is in how they were making armor back then, not how can I make armor today. And so that's been my area of focus. And I had recalled a video of these guys hammering out copper bowls, pots, buckets, a video I had seen when I was in high school. I had zero interest really in that type of stuff at the time. I think that's about it. Yep. Okay. Okay, there we go. I mean, there's a 1970. That's where I got that from. So I'm going to back this off. Stop screen share. Okay. But yeah. And so I was looking for a copy of this Santa Clara video, and just so I could kind of catch up. I had read an article in Snag Magazine's, whatever it is, their publication. And some of the stuff that I was reading, it's like, okay, it's interesting, but some of it didn't make a lot of sense to me with how they were describing it. And so I went searching on the internet in 2002 or 3 or 4, or whatever it was, for the Santa Clara video. And I did get a copy of that as well. And it's really fun to watch that one kind of in relation to this one. and see some of the similarities in metalworking techniques. I think the Santa Clara one, they said that they were taught by Spanish missionaries or something in some of their copperworking techniques. But they are actually making copper cauldrons in the same method, but they are using sledgehammers instead of a big water power trip hammer. And they're making cauldrons that are much larger than these buckets out of copper. So it's worth watching that one as well to see the similarities and the differences in how they work it. If you want, that's another one that we could kind of talk through. It'd be fun to watch. We can share our thoughts with people on that one as well. So
as these things apply to what we can do now and building armor and all of that, one of the things that I get to is, how thick can it really be? What can you really end up with? How does it really work? I took one of mine and took measurements off of it.
Yeah.
So what do I need to do? Make my video big. How do I do that?
Well,
I haven't done that in
I was going to say,
time.
we'll cut this one here, Wade.
Okay.
And we'll pick it up again here in a little bit.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll do a continuation of this.
Cool. So it really is, I mean, watching that video when you come from modern sheet metal work, it's just a totally different way of playing with things.
Yes.
It's amazing. It's amazing how different it is. And you're working really thick in a bunch of pieces, and you're just pushing the metal out, thinning it out as you're giving it form.
Yeah.
And we tend to think of things as sheet and paper and moving the things around, like we see the silversmith of Williamsburg doing things.
Yeah.
And not this way, which has been described various times more like pushing clay around. And it really is just a very different way of thinking about it and gives you a different approach to the whole thing.
Yep. Okay, we're back to part 2, I guess, is what we'll say. We're a continuation of the last discussion. Where we went through the Bieno bucket making guys. Some fun stuff we covered there. We're going to continue discussing some of it. I've got some pictures that I'm going to scroll through to show some of my visit there, as well as some other photos I've come across that kind of help tell the story of what we've got. Let's see. Okay, is that working?
Yes.
Okay, so in the old video, you can see some guys swinging a really big sledgehammer sideways to kind of set the wedges and adjust the hammerhead. This is the hammer that was in that shot. You can see it's pretty substantial. It was lovely, so I had to take a picture. These are some of the...
I was going to say, it's nice when your fine-tuning adjustment hammer is that big.
Yes. So out in the streets there in Bieno, they had some anvils being used as bollards to block off a road. So you can kind of get a sense of scale here from these. I mean, they were substantial. These are newer anvils. These are dovetailed, but it gives you a sense of size. These are big. This is one of the planishing hammers that they had in there that they were using on the bottoms. Took some photos just to get an idea of scale. This is the one they were using for the sides of the buckets. Some of the tongs, if you're paying attention to the video, you could see him swapping out tongs. Well, maybe they didn't show him swapping out tongs, I guess, but you could see they had different sizes from where they started the buckets or where they were holding the blanks to deep buckets. These are the shears they're using. I think I commented in previously about it was an old bolt that they had forged.
Right.
You can see the threads there, and you can see kind of the lines from where it was the threads. In the old black and white video, I don't know that you could make out it was a bolt, and this is likely a replacement since then, because I don't recall seeing that in it, but we may have not have had the best shot either.
No, they weren't that rough, at least.
Yeah. So this is the actual face of the die that they're using when making the buckets. I think he called it a thumbnail die or something like that. I don't recall exactly. I mean, with translation from Italian to English and whatnot. But you can see it's not just a dome. It actually has a projection that sticks out a little past the rest of it. And he said that was critical. That was an important aspect of how it worked. Haven't theorized a lot yet on that as to why. Top view of the same. And you can see, I mean, if you kind of compare to my thumb there, it's about as big as the end joint. So they had a kind of layout showing the progression of steps for people coming to visit. And this is one of the starting blanks, the plates. And, you know, it's not even square. It's just a sheared off plate. So this is after the first stretching pass. And you can kind of get an idea of how much it's grown from that there. Stretched a little more before trimming. After trimming. These are some others. I was just trying to get a photo to show how rough they really are. Quite lumpy.
Very, yes.
Couple more laying around. This one I took a picture of because it was big. Heel to toe, my boot measures 12 inches. So, I mean, kind of give you a sense. This is pretty good size. Granted, my foot's down at the bottom, so there's a little bit of forced perspective going on. But this was well over 2 foot in diameter. So they made big buckets as well as little buckets. They got some of them thrown in. These aren't sized. Again, they just had some parts laying around to kind of show people the steps, because these are all random stacked in there. So this wouldn't have been thrown together and pushed into the furnace as a usable stack like this.
Right.
Here's one that they've got mashed in and sandwiched up. And it's one of those, you can, if you look at the edge there, it's significantly thinner than this. Part of it is lumpiness of the material, but it's also because the centers were much thicker than the edges. All the prep work they did with the hammer, working them from the center out, leaving the centers thick and the edges much thinner. This is a stack that's been finished that hasn't been pulled apart. And you can see all the layers. Everything's lumpy and wavy. Here's an older bucket that they had sitting around that had been squared out, like in the video. There weren't, the guys there are still making buckets now and again, but it's not a full-time operation. So, you know, they set up the hammers and crank out a few every once in a while. I didn't see any real sign that they were still squaring them out today. They may, but who knows. Top view of the same bucket, kind of showing how it was squared out. A little bit better shot than what they were showing in some of the black and white video that we were looking at. I took this shot just to show, here's one of the blanks in relation to a roughly finished bucket. You can see pretty much the same diameter. These weren't necessarily, I mean, these obviously aren't from the same stack, but there's a really big pot. I mean, this one, you can see my boot there right at the edge. Again, this is, I was thinking it was about 2 foot, but looking at the photo again, it's more than 2 feet in diameter. I wish I had gotten a shot of the side of it so you could see how deep it was, but it was significant. I mean, big pot. So this one I liked because most of them that you see and the ones that you see in the brickwork video or the buckets for brickwork were squared out bottoms, so they'll sit flat so you can put stuff in them. But this one was actually done rounded rather than squared out, which would be beneficial if you were trying to make helmets rather than buckets, because you aren't stretching those corners out. You can leave some of the thickness there just by bowling it.
Right. That looks a whole lot more like a helmet. And it certainly shows the mechanism they're using is perfectly capable of creating that raw shape easily enough.
Yep. So this is something I came across the internet somewhere. Don't recall where, but these guys, I mean, pretty much everything you see down here is round bottomed. There's a square bottom one just to the right of the hammerhead. This is a different shop, obviously, because this head here, I mean, this is a purpose made head. You know, they're not swapping out dies on that one. Guy manually trimming there. This one looks like it might be a square bottom one in the kind of foreground here, but just a cool photo.
Mhm.
You see the tongs in the guy's hand, same style of tongs, the guy down here at the anvil. I'm guessing his right foot here probably is holding the wedge. I don't
Right.
know. It could be the left. I don't know. Looks like he's got his feet wrapped up to protect against the heat, though.
Yes. There would be heat.
You're shoving your foot up against a hot piece of metal or even a wedge against a hot piece of metal. That's another cool photo I came across. But they've got some of the buckets hung as lights in a street. I looked for the street. I didn't find any buckets when I was there. Okay, so we're jumping to some photos of the first experiment I did with this. I'd have to go back and figure out what year. Previously, when we were talking earlier, I had said it was with pear that we had done an experiment. And I did do an experiment with pear, but it was different than this one. The very first one was with Ralph Snell. He came out to visit shortly after we discovered this video, and we did some playing. So in the experiment we did, we had it scaled down. We didn't have a big furnace to play with, so we needed to do something we could handle, and we were going to be doing it by hand, not with a power hammer. So it's like, okay, this is an experiment. So all of these plates, it was just some rough, nasty 1/8-inch plate that I had laying around, and we did edge thin them. And then this outermost layer, I just grabbed some 16 gauge or 14 gauge, something thinner. I wasn't too worried about it. It was a sacrificial layer. So it is what it is there. This one we had 5, I believe. I don't know. We'll see in a second. I think it was 5. So kind of mashed it all down. I didn't have one of those big beams with the hook in the floor, so we just used some clamps and kind of clamped everything as tight as we could get it. So with this one, we didn't use any clay or slip on the layers. It's one of those, we knew in the video they were showing something, but we weren't 100% sure. We figured that's probably what it was, but we figured this is rough, nasty, gross metal. So we figured it'll be fine. You know, you can't get rusty, nasty metal to weld, so it would be fine. So this was us starting out, no wedges or anything. We were like, yeah, we'll just hold it at an angle. And it becomes awkward trying to hold it at an angle with the hammer blows, nothing to support it to keep it from bouncing you around. So it was a little bit of a struggle, but I mean, we were able to kind of plug along for a bit. Here's our improvised wedge. Flip my petting house anvil over to kind of help support while we were doing this. I mean, this was 16, 17, 18 years ago, probably, when we were doing this.
Yeah,
At this point,
it was a long time ago.
learned a lot since then, but it was fun playing. So this was our finished stack here. You can see about 10 inches in diameter. And again, this was only 1/8-inch material we were starting with. So we knew we were limited in as far as how deep we could go.
Right. I've started with 1/8 inch by hand and played around, and you can play, but you can't go very deep out of 1/8 inch.
Yeah. You can see some change. I mean, these all started out essentially the same diameter, and you know, I think we were just kind of peeling them apart at this point. One of the things, you can see some hot spots here, and you can see some brighter areas. The rust is from us throwing them in cooling tank water, you know, so we were getting them wet, and they were starting to show some signs of rust as we were playing with them. But here we've got them all pulled apart. So what's fun is this is the outermost layer, which was the thinnest, and it definitely received a lot of abuse. I don't know if you can see the tear through there.
Right. Yep.
But it did start to, it was oxidizing a lot. We didn't have a furnace to put the entire stack in, so we were heating it up in a smaller forge. We had to rotate it, and it took a lot of time because it wasn't designed for heating up a mass like this. So we did experience a lot more oxidation on the outer layer and a lot of loss of material there. The innermost, where we were beating the crap out of it, and it was also exposed to the atmosphere a lot more, multiple heats. I couldn't even guess how many heats we had to try and do to get to where we were, because we're amateurs. So, and we didn't have a big drop hammer to really move the metal. So
Right.
this one, you can see it tore through as well. This was the innermost layer here, and you can see it's bright and shiny. There's no even discoloration from heat other than kind of around the edges and right there where it actually fused to this layer. And there was a couple of spots around the rim where we had some fusing happening as well. We ended up using a torch and chisels and various things, so some of these ended up being exposed to heat after the fact. Prior to that, they were just clean and bright on these inner layers, which was just blew our minds at this point. I mean, we were not expecting to see this metal clean and bright and shiny. I mean, zero loss of material to scale. Really, really cool. So we chopped one of them in half just to kind of see the variation in thickness. We didn't have a good way to measure it other than to cut it in half. Again, this started out all as 1/8 inch. When we edged thin to about a 1/16 of an inch is kind of what we're figuring. We couldn't go too thin and still have something, is what we were figuring.
Right.
But you can see a little bit thicker right in there, but then it's not too bad. You know, I can't tell if it's play of light or if it's just a little bit thinner through here, maybe a little bit thinner through here as well.
Right. But overall, it's given that you were randomly hammering and doing all sorts of crazy things, that's pretty even.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, total amateurs. No idea what we were doing other than we watched that black and white video a few times. You can see really clear here, though, that oxidation layer, and it's basically blued. I mean, there's not any heavy scaling or anything, and then you jump up into this area where it's even more protected, and you can see just how bright and shiny it was.
Right. That is
This shows the
interesting.
importance of making sure it's coated, and why the coating
Yes.
doesn't just go away as you're mashing it and stretching it, but as you're stretching that metal out, it's exposing new metal, new surface area.
Right.
So as it's stretching, I don't know why the clay layer really works, because you would think it would kind of stretch and just go away. It's not like it's staying wet in there. So there's some kind of weird magic going on. I don't know. No, there's a black sallet. I thought I bumped these to a different position, but there it is. So later on, Per came to visit Texas to check out a suit of armor that was on display down in Dallas, and he had a couple of days here, and so he came up to the shop. Well, we went down and we saw some nice armor and got some good pictures there. But then we came back and we were discussing the Bieno bucket makers and talking about it, and kind of started theorizing on whether or not it would be possible to do other objects in a stack. And so we decided to try a stack of breastplates. And again, this was probably 1/8 inch material, scaled down version, and we couldn't really come up with a good way to sandwich everything. And so we were like, well, you'd have rivet holes at, the shoulder strap area and maybe a couple of rivet holes around the waist. And so we just took 3 plates and just riveted them together at the 4 corners. Our starting blanks on these were basically a hexagon. So there was not a curve cut out for an armhole or anything like that. No curve cut in the base. It was just straight cuts, going from a flat plate to this.
Did you do any pre-drawing out before you made it?
I don't know that we did.
Okay.
Maybe should have. Maybe Per would recall.
The time I did an experiment with a single layer in a power hammer, but cold, just to be rude, I drew out the bottom, sort of the bottom sides out and the top corners out a little bit. Obviously, you didn't do the top corners.
Yeah.
And that gave me a pattern that looks sort of like, a breastplate pattern to play with, and it thinned the edges, so I didn't end up with a thick edge.
Yeah. Looking at the hammer marks, let me back up one photo here. We've got
I
some
think
hammer marks going all the way out here, so we may have pulled the sides out some. It
it
doesn't look
looks
like we did the
no,
top.
no, I don't think you did the top at all, but I think you probably did some on the sides.
Yeah. And it
And
may have been after we had them riveted together just so we had the mass to move at the same time instead of a thin plate getting cold fast. So here's the three of them pulled apart, the outermost and the innermost. And if you notice, we've got bright, shiny material again here where it wasn't oxidizing. And this isn't, it wasn't encased. I don't recall if we dipped these or not either.
right, but it also is showing when you were working it, you were really working the bottom 2/3 of the
Yeah.
material, and you left that top section like an
Yeah.
early 16th century breastplate, just sort of straight and unmessed with.
Yep. So we had to finish out a couple of them, or work on finishing out a couple of them, just for fun.
Right.
So throwing a fat neck roll on there doesn't look like we did on that one, but a little bit of playing and fluting.
Mm-hmm. How big were they?
Um,
Half scale?
Maybe might not have even been half scale. I really don't recall.
Right. Half scale turns into actually a pretty small thing. I
Yeah.
did some half scale for models, and yeah, I mean,
So I
it's
mean, you can see my hand or Pear's hand here. I don't recall who was holding it. This is sitting on top of that same anvil block.
right. Yeah, it's half scale or a little bigger. It's in that range.
I had some other pictures with me or Pear in them holding them, and you could see better, but I didn't figure it was necessary to throw those in
Right.
there for the discussion. Um,
The
so
main
from here
reason
we can,
the only real reason the scale matters is 1/8 inch works at a certain size, and when you want to go bigger, you need to get more material to be able to push it out more.
yes. So from here, if you want, we can discuss some of the pieces that I brought back, or we
Right.
can jump into some other pictures.
Let's go to the pieces you brought back.
Okay. So you've got a couple that so when I went to Vienna, I managed to buy a few of their buckets that they had lying around and some of the pieces. And then I had to lug back, I forget how many pounds, 30, 40 pounds of iron by train and walking and subway to get back to where I was at. I forget. I mean, I was like
Right.
12 hours south of where, I started type thing. So it was fun trek.
Right.
Um,
And I started being greedy and asking for a bunch of everything, and then you said, "Nope, not happening. I got to carry all this stuff." So
yeah,
thank you for what you brought back.
hindsight, I wish I could have brought back more. But
Obviously.
yeah.
So the
So
first thing, you've got a starter blank that was flat. So
yeah. So let me back up a little bit here. So this one here that I brought back, you can see the lumpiness from the cross peen marks. This is after, so they do the initial stretch and then they stack them and do another stretch. This is after the second stretch. And it has been trimmed some, but it hasn't been thrown into, the stack to be made into buckets yet, obviously. So you can see the marks. I mean, they're pretty substantial.
right, right. They
And
weren't
what's
really
fun,
caring about subtlety here.
yeah, yeah. I mean, no real clean order. You can see the marks carry through to the back as well.
And those marks at least partially come from the other one that was mating up against it. So they're a duller mark. So you're sort
Yeah,
of blending the two shapes, which
yeah.
is interesting.
Yeah. So rather than going hard against an anvil, where it would be, creating a flatter surface, going hard against an anvil, you get some carry through, quite a bit. Um, I mean, you can see stretch marks from the edges of the hammer as it was driving in. So I took some thickness measurements on this various places. Right here in the middle on some of these peaks, you're hitting 0.22. I mean, just shy of a quarter of an inch on some of these peaks. And some of them may have been a full quarter of an inch. But this is after the second round, too. So it's one of those, when I was saying they're a quarter, 5/16, it may have varied from plate to plate, just depending on what scrap they got. It
Right.
could have been that this entire thing had been struck first round, and then second round, it didn't necessarily hit those same spots. So it got shrunk a little bit of loss from scale and whatnot. So right here in this area, some of the peaks are as much as 0.22. The valleys, I was measuring on some of those down to 0.15. So pretty big difference from peaks to valleys there. As you step out to this area, running a little bit more consistent, but about 0.1. So a little bit under an eighth of an inch. And then coming out to the outermost edge, I was going to say, make sure I'm still holding this in shot because I keep looking at this. So if you can't see anything,
No,
coming out to this outermost edge where you can see the heaviest or the closest marks, you can see where they're really focused on driving this edge out. It got down to 0.06 to 0.03 out near the edge here. So going from a quarter of an inch down to a 16th of an inch, roughly, or less in some spots. So this is one of the prepared blanks to go in, though, into a stack.
Right. So that gives us sort of where the material needed to be in order to draw something out and end up with a bucket. Then I
Yes.
actually took measurements on here. This bucket has ended up 12 to 13 inches wide and about 5 3/4 inches deep. And you can see along the edge a series of measurements that I did up through the height. If it weren't squared out at that corner up here, it wouldn't have the stupid, really thin spots there. Coming on up to the top, I've got a spot that's left at 0.124 in the middle. I measured another one of mine that ends up about 0.98. So I think there's a good deal of variability, but generally we've got in 0.088, 0.19455, back up to 7.2. The thin spot ends up being right around here. On this one, it's 050, 046. On the other one, it's about 035. So, it happens. I did a few more measurements around, and there's variability in the thickness, but you've got enough material here to play with. And if you were building a helmet, you'd be a little more careful about doing the thickness and leaving a little more in the top. Just for
Yeah.
fun, I took the measurement, the circumference around the bottom edge of this one, and compared it to the Glorious Salade that Francois made for me. And they're within 4 centimeters of the same size. So
Yeah.
what we've got here is a thing that is about as deep as and about as big a circumference as a salad. Yeah, it's all the wrong shape. But
yeah, it's just slapping it around a little.
But yeah, it's a little movement. So there we go.
So
I don't know if we can see this. Can you actually see the shiny
yeah,
bits down in there?
yeah.
The shiny bits down in there are about the same size as the thumbnail. They're the last joint of my thumb, and they look like they're hammer marks that like we see sometimes inside of armor. But when I go over to the outside, and you can't correlate it without looking, but they're just lumps. They're not hammer marks in the sense of mangling the thickness of the metal. They're just moving it around because it's being hammered on top of another soft, heated up piece of metal. This is the interior one, so we can see what the interior looks like.
So yeah, this is the innermost plate that is coming in direct contact with the hammer.
Right.
And you're getting dense rather than craters or pot marks.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
yes, it transfers through because of how all the layers are stacked, and you're not going against a hard surface. It's not just pushing the metal out of the way; it's deforming the metal.
Exactly. Right.
I mean, when you look at like gold leaf, they stack up all the layers and they beat on them. And yes, they're using a large mallet type thing, but it's transferring the force through and evening everything at the same time. It's
Right.
not just denting it. I say
Right. It's
denting. I guess it's not
thinning.
moving the metal out of the way in the same manner.
Right. It's not doing the spot thinning that we're used to seeing when we pound a piece of metal into an anvil
Yeah.
with a rounded hammer.
One of the things with yours, it's got the squared out corner there. I mean, I've got one here as well.
Right.
You can see it's pretty squared out. One of the reasons I grabbed the photos of the round bottom one is to show this is not necessary. This is just what they were doing because they are making buckets.
They don't
They
want
want
them to
them to
fall
sit
over.
flat. You see in the pictures, like some of the ones I pointed out, where the round bottom. If you do a round bottom, you don't over thin this area.
Right.
So, you get the mindset, oh, well, that's way too thin up there. You can't have that. It's like, well, you wouldn't have it if you made it round bottom. You'd have a more consistent thickness through there.
Right. Exactly.
Um,
Actually, one of the things that is going on with my other one, this was an in-between layer that you got for me.
yeah.
And around the edge, I don't know if you can see it. Tell me if you can.
It's a little blurry, but yes, you can see marks.
We're still seeing those cross peen marks around the edges, but just in what looks like about the outer inch and a half in that range. After that, I'm getting to the lumpiness that happens just from the way they're forming is working. And all of those
Yeah.
are lumps that transfer to the inside. Yep.
So I don't know. Can you see those any
Oh,
clearer on
that's
mine,
better.
maybe?
Right. They stacked yours the other way, so the hammer marks are on the outside. That's convenient.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
hammer marks are on the inside.
So, but they're pretty distinct. But yeah, it goes to show
Yeah.
this area did not receive much hammer work.
Right.
They pre-thinned it and it pretty much stayed. I mean, yeah, it got pushed down some, but it didn't get beat up. It didn't get stretched a whole lot more. So that became the finished thickness. I should have grabbed a tape measure, measure my blank, the starting blank, just to get a rough idea of how it compared. I mean, you saw in the one picture, like this blank is a little bit bigger than the bucket. Can you see it laying over the top? So, I mean, these are all similar, but they're not exact. These all came out of different stacks and there's variance.
Right. So we don't know exactly how much shrinkage happened. The circumference is going to go down a little bit just because it happens. You don't get all of your movement through stretching. You get a little compression at the edge, but it's not a lot, right? Our guess is maybe a 14-inch thing turns into a 12-inch thing, or maybe a 13-inch thing is a 12-inch thing, or maybe even about a 12 and a quarter is 12. It's somewhere in that range.
Yeah. One of the things, what were we talking about there with the buckets? Oh, weights. You weighed your bucket, right?
I weighed both of my buckets. One of my buckets is 4 pounds, 13 ounces. The other is 5 pounds, 2 ounces, right in that range. So they're 4 3/4 to 5 pounds.
Okay. The two that I have, one of them was 5.1 pounds or something. The other was, it was right about 5 pounds as well, I believe. The blank that I had actually in this one here weighed in at about 4.5 pounds. So it was a little bit on the lighter side, perhaps, than the other four examples that we have.
Right.
So
given all the scientific method they're using in making their blanks, this is going to happen. There's going to be some variability there, but the thing that I was getting out of that is this is in the weight range for some helmets. It's
Yes.
not, we're not talking 20 gauge and is useless for anything. It's about the right amount of material, about the right depth, and about the right final circumference for a salad.
Yeah.
Not the heaviest one, but a salad.
Well, one of the things that, as we've talked and looked through things separately and discussed things in the past, the black salettes in particular, in my mind, are kind of a carryover from this process, perhaps. And when we started looking at weights on those, I mean, what, half a dozen plus that we were able to find weights on, they're all
Right.
running really close to 5 pounds,
Right.
plus or minus some, but right there in that 5 pound range. A few of them that are missing visors were coming in at 4 pounds something, I think.
Sure.
A couple of the examples in Cherbourg. But again, it's right there in that range. Looking at other Salette examples, you get a wide range from what I've seen. You get some that are in the 4 or 5 pound range, but you get some that are in the 10 pound range. And it's one of
And
those, I think, this is my opinion, but I think it has to do with the manner in which they're made. We have seen the big heavy crater marks in helmets and salads in, I'm trying to think of some of the other helmets that I've looked at. I mean, it's typically in
salads
heavier
is
skulled helmets where you see that.
right. Right.
Um, I don't think the insides of any of the bassinets I've seen were in good enough condition to really make out hammer marks. I've seen two or
Yeah.
three of them, and it's one of those. Usually they were pretty rough, just from corrosion and age and wear. Bar boots, I've seen the inside of a couple of bar boots where you can see heavy marks down in the skull, but you don't see the heavy marks further out.
Right.
Uh, a number of salettes that I've seen, I know there was one in Munich that I saw where you could see heavy marks again in the top half, the heavy cratered pop marks in, but as you come out towards the edge, they go away.
Right.
So, heavy stretching with a big hammer was definitely done, in my opinion, to some pieces. The difference that we're seeing in the black salettes, you've got a 5 pounds, but it hasn't been ground. Typically,
Right.
they aren't ground, they aren't cleaned up and smoothed up and ground. They're wavy and lumpy. But the insides, I've seen the insides of two or three of them. I'd have to really dig to find pictures because I know I photographed a few of them over the years. You don't see that heavy cratering that you see in other helmets. And with these buckets, you don't see heavy cratering.
No.
It just doesn't happen. The innermost or the outermost is all just lumpy waves, not heavy pop marks from the impact of a hammer, with a single piece of metal in an anvil. So it's definitely a different process that was being used. Moving them so they don't fall. They were kind of precariously balanced. I mean, I can jump to the pictures. I've got a couple of pictures showing the insides of just, the heavy crater marks. I've got a picture of that. I've got some pictures of the black salettes, if you want to look at those.
We can
Just
flash them. We can flash them
yeah.
by while we're playing.
Let me
But
go
while
back.
you're looking for things, what we're sort of getting is that this is a way of achieving sufficient volume in approximately vaguely correct thicknesses to create a helmet. And these buckets, if you squished them sideways a little bit, you're getting awfully close to the shape that you see here. Yes, it needs final forming. Yes, it needs to be pulled into a head shape. But if you started with one of those rounder bowls, you have a front view or just a different one? Yeah, there you go. If you started with one of the rounder bowls and then push the sides in, just sort of squashing the thing, and let the tail kick out. No,
Yeah,
you
I
don't
don't
have
have
a
a back
final.
shot of this one.
Yeah,
I
no,
do,
that
but just not handy.
yeah, that's fine. You don't have a finished helmet, of course not. But you've got most of the material in the places that are necessary, ready for final forming pretty quickly. And you've got the right amount of material in about the right places. So it seems very plausible that this is the kind of thing that they were doing.
Yeah. One second. Let me jump to a different screen share here. I found a different shot of it. Let's see. So there you go. You've got the back, and you can see the back here. Even though they just kind of pinched it in, there isn't a lot of pushing it back in towards the back of the skull. They just pinched the material. So it's one of
No,
those going from a bucket to this, like you said, you squash in the sides, you pinch the back just so it's not too bell shaped in the back.
well, and so that
Um,
it'll kind of fit a human head.
yeah,
Because, I mean, the pinching, until I really saw one in person and saw some of the crazier things, it's a pretty aggressive pinch. Okay, what I was talking about was I was used to seeing these things in profile. And so you see that nice long slopey back, which we see here in that hard line that runs there. But the thing I didn't get really is sort of obvious from this left side, which is the right side of the helmet, but left side on the screen, it really drops down. So that pucker in the back isn't removing material, isn't raising it in, isn't changing the shape as much, but it is tucking it in so that it would fit on a head
yeah,
without moving all that material to make an elegant thing. So one of these things would really fit a human head far better than I thought they would, and better than the Star Wars vision of Salad's would. Um, it's a better helmet than I sort of thought about the first 20 years I was thinking about these things.
yeah. One of the things, I mean, we're seeing these, my mind immediately when I saw the video thought of this particular type of helmet. And it's one of those, these popped up 1480s, 1490s, somewhere in there.
In that
Uh,
range, yeah.
Prior to that, I mean, you saw the more typical Salettes on the market. You see heavy hammer marks in those. You don't see them in these. And it's one of those where you go from the 1480s, 1490s, and then you pop into the 1500s and 1510s, 1520s. Some of the closed helms that I've seen and handled were significantly lighter in weight. They didn't have heavy pop marks on the inside. You had, a clean flute lines from the inside to the outside, where you're carrying through marks on a more uniformly thickness piece of material in some instances. I'm not
In
trying
some
to make blanket
instances.
statements across the board, but it's one of those. I could see this process being one where you're getting your volume fast and then
Right.
passing it off to somebody to finish. I mean, you see it here where they're finishing it quick.
Well, and they're
You could,
doing things, they're producing things by the hundreds and thousands. When you get into the late 15th, especially the early 16th century, you're starting to see these massive orders of munition armors for just lots of armor.
yeah,
And Nuremberg and the Italians are just cranking stuff out. Um, there are big armies moving lots of people around. It's direct correlation, causation, who knows? But they needed a lot of armor. They needed a lot of cheap armor. Um, this is a way to get a lot of cheap volumes made up. And
yeah,
one of the things that this really does for you, that's always, everybody's got their pet peeves, and just let people live with them. But they're starting from billets in the very beginning. They're not starting from, 050 or 035 or whatever it is they bought from Admiral Steel, just where I get my 1050. So you have to take something, and with a hammer mill, they've had hammer mills since the 14th century, you're having to change it into a usable piece. This allows you to change it from a lump to a volume all at the same time,
yeah,
instead of this thing we've gotten used to, which you are very good at, by the way, raising in the modern sense of raising, taking a big disc and pushing it down into a helmet. Um, it's an amazing way of doing metal work. Somebody who's good at it is a blast to watch, like you, not me. But it's silly.
Yeah.
You don't take a hammer mill and draw it out to 14 gauge and then push it back down and turn it into a helmet.
Yep.
You
Exactly.
do this whether you do it one at a time or many at a time, even if all you're doing is going for, a volume and achieving the rough thickness you're aiming for, and then you do what we would think of as typical techniques to
Yeah.
get the final shape. It has always made more intellectual sense to me as a way that they would have done things.
Yeah.
Just
And
just my feeling.
with the research I was doing, my interest was in how they made it. And so trying to figure out some of this stuff earlier on, even the first rolling mills, I don't think popped up until the 1700s. I mean, armor, they may have had smaller ones for gold and stuff like that. But as far as any large ones, I mean, the earlier
Blair's
mills were slitting mills, for
Yeah.
cutting.
Blair was claiming 17th century, but still you're
Okay.
you're you're into the end of armor. And they made a lot of
Yes.
armor in the 17th century, but
Yeah.
you're near the end.
Way past when this stuff was being done. And it's one of
Absolutely.
those, I mean, playing with small scale stuff with a hammer, if you try and take a piece and stretch it out into a large surface area flat, it gets wavy and ripply. The material doesn't want to move out. If you aren't hitting the whole thing like a rolling mill does, you start creating volume just trying to move that metal. It starts to
Yes.
pucker and wave and do weird stuff. So yes, it comes back to, why would I want to beat this all the way out into a big sheet just to try and push it all back in? When I went to Thailand, I was talking to the guys there, who were making vessels, and they made some huge silver bowls. And I was asking him why they didn't start with sheet. And he was like, well, machines are expensive and it's just easier to cast a piece of silver. And when they cast them into kind of a lozenge shaped puck. So it's thicker in the middle and thinner on the edge. And so they've got their starting piece right there, and they just go from that and they raise it into a vessel. So
And
it's one of those, when you look at these other countries that are still using, what we think of as more primitive technology, they're still doing it essentially the same way as, you
right,
know, they were
they're
a couple
still
hundred years ago.
they're still dealing with an economy where machinery is expensive and people are relatively cheap.
Yeah.
And especially with silver, you can cast a billet that gives you a form to start with, and you can just work it. You can't do the same thing with steel, but you can certainly work big billets and then start them into shapes and play the game. I mean, do I know how they packed steel plate across the Alps? No, I have no idea. But it doesn't seem to make sense for it to have been, taken out to 1 millimeter and then turned into most of the armor, especially if you're working on helmets and breastplate kinds of things.
Yeah.
So
Like the town of Bieno, I mean, they date back to Roman era. They've got iron there, they've got the ore source, they've got the trees, they've got the water power. So, I mean, they've been doing work there for a long time. But it is just a couple hours north of Brescia, which was a major armor producing center. Milan is, a little further over. This is just one location where we know there were hammer mills that date back a long ways. Germany has quite a number of hammer mills as well, especially in southern Germany. There were lots of armor shops there. I mean, we've got various records of the sizes of some of these shops. And it's one of those, with what we see with the hammer mills, we know it's doable. The experiments
absolutely.
that I was playing with by hand, I think with more experience and practice and guys that know
Well,
what they're doing, I think one could easily achieve small stacks, you know,
right.
more
I mean,
limited production. But you could do this in a small shop with 4 or 5 people. You wouldn't
yes,
have to have some massive equipment to do this.
you don't have to, but if you're going to have a manufacturing center,
Yes.
and a lot of those manufacturing centers had a good number of hammer mills running, so you're going to use them if you can, and you might as well use it to push this out. And
Yeah.
this kind of thing, if you can get, the rough volume, so instead of the first 50 hours or whatever it is that you would have
Yeah.
been raising a helmet, you get 6 of them in, oh, I'll be generous, an hour to that rough volume. you've made it possible for you to set it up with separate sets of skills, with people with different levels of skill doing different parts of the process, and somebody who really knows what they're doing, finishing it off, cranking it out, throw it in the pile, and shipping it out.
Yeah.
So
What I know for me, when I first started trying to raise, I mean, I could easily spend, 40 hours trying to raise a hat. And I know a lot of people, they're still at that level. It's common, um, especially when you're taught kind of the traditional way of raising today. It takes time and it takes skill. I know lots of people that
absolutely.
just can't do it, have tried and tried and tried, even on smaller copper pieces. It takes them an immense amount of time just because they haven't quite gotten the knack. So you need somebody with skill to use kind of traditional angle raising techniques. This, you just need one guy that knows how to direct the hammer blows to the right spot, and you can get a stack and get past that hard part. So yeah,
Right.
like you're saying, it's huge time saver. Um,
And and as I said, I think it just makes sense. The whole business of being able to move something, 2 5 inches deep or 6.5, or however deep these various buckets are, and they're all variable, in 2 heats, even 5 heats, instead, or 10 heats, instead of the massive numbers of heats that we end up using, and we're doing spot heats, and we're,
yeah,
moving a little piece of material and then putting it in and getting a whole floor covered in scale. I mean,
yeah,
I can sweep the stuff up when I'm doing raising, and it's big chunks of
yeah,
flakes of iron oxide that are lying all over the ground. The whole idea of being able to work something that's 2 inches thick so that you don't have to have all those things and you can keep hammering it for longer. I mean, when we were doing I say we, I did the heating and you guys did all the work. But when the experiment happened at the forging where I watched, um, we never ran out of heat. Everybody
yeah,
got tired and they said, "Here, let's put it back in the furnace and let it give ourselves some time to wait."
yep.
And
Or pass the hammer to somebody else that was fresh
yes,
because yeah,
and we're running 2 or 3 hammerers at the hammer guys at the same time, and we're still running. Oh, just let's get it hot again because we don't want to have to hit it anymore.
yeah,
um, and that's a huge difference from just having to always reheat the thing over and over and over again because you know 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter, or even 3 millimeter, it just cools down real fast.
yeah. It's one of those. I know when I'm raising, I'm often spending about as much time heating as I am hammering, which
Absolutely.
is just a huge time suck. Um,
Absolutely. Yes. And I'm not nearly as good. I'm not getting nearly as much movement going. But yeah, that's it's about half and half or even more. It depends on whether I'm using the oxyacetylene torch to heat or the oxypropane or my Eric Thing forge as
yeah,
to exactly how it goes. I kind of prefer the Eric Thing because it'll hold my piece for me.
yeah,
But and it gets a bigger heat, and that's either good or bad. But the it you are spending half the time in that range doing the heating and then getting it out of the forge and putting it on the tool and getting it set up and ready to hit and then hitting it for a while and then putting it back in. Oh yeah, it's way more than half that you're moving the thing around and not actually hitting it with a
yeah,
hammer.
yeah.
And
I was going to say in the Bieno bucket making video there, we saw, I talked to the guys and they were saying back when they're running efficient, like what we saw, it's about 7 minutes to get the volume, so there's a little bit of time setting the stack over there and starting to hammer on it, pulling it out, grabbing the next stack. But the guy's essentially just sitting there hammering stack after stack after stack as people bring them over to him. So it's one of
right, you
those,
got to
even if it were 10 minutes per stack, you're looking at 5 or 6 stacks an hour at 7 a
at
stack. So, maybe 40 hats, 40 blanks, buckets in an hour. If you're working an 8 or 10
well,
hour day, you're looking at a
that's a
huge
lot.
volume of material. I mean,
No.
hundreds
Yes.
a day. And it's not literal day from start to finish, but if you're
No.
cycling in a 2 week period, say you spend a week prepping and then a week um, raising them into buckets, you know,
Right. And you,
what is
yes,
that?
you didn't end
28,
up with
2,000 pieces in a week or something? I mean,
right.
doing, just rough math here, if you're doing, yeah, it's obscene the amount of metal that is being moved in comparison to what we think of today with angle racing. And okay, no, you don't have a finished hat at the end of it, but okay, break
No,
it down.
but
Say there's 2,000 in a week's worth of time. How much time on each individual's piece is not much.
well, yeah, but even if you threw, 5 hours into finishing one of these things, you've changed 40 hours into 5 hours and 20 minutes. You know,
Yeah,
there's a huge difference, and it wouldn't be 5 hours of finishing for these guys after the
not, yeah,
first.
not for these.
No, after the first 20 of them you've done, you figured it out. And you've told the guy you want your volume moved a little over here and you don't want it to be quite so pushed over there. And I'm just going to hit it real hard. I'm going to put it in that stack squasher and squash the thing and get it ready for me or whatever. Um, you'd be spending minutes to get the form out of from a properly shaped bucket for one of these. And you'd spend a
Yeah,
lot more time on a piece you were making for Maximilian, the Emperor,
yeah.
sure. He deserves more time. And then the finishing work would just dwarf everything else. But, you know,
But
that's what
again,
it's
you've
supposed
got
to
your
do.
volume. Yeah.
Yep.
One of the other things that we realized really early on with the experiments that I think is important also to note is you need a furnace of some type to do this. You can't
Right.
spot heat. You can't do it over a coal or a charcoal forge and just get part of it hot. You need to get the volume of it hot.
And they have to have been, I mean, you need the same kind of ability to heat that you would need to heat a large bloom and do the refining on a large bloom, right? I mean, if you're trying to do a bloom that's more than about 20 pounds, you need to be able to heat up a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's they've got to have been able to heat a large thing all at once. And really, I mean, when we built the simple primitive forge for the one at the forging, it's it's a normal fire, but with a furnace with walls around it, so
Yeah.
that you can heat it up. It doesn't have to be anything terribly complicated. I assume you could do the same thing with a charcoal fire. You'd be burning through a good deal of charcoal, but I bet less than you would be if you hand raised every one of these things by a
Yeah.
lot. So, I mean, just since we're just jabbering, the experiment we did used some fire brick on the ground. Literally, we were out at a parking or at a campground. So, fire brick on the ground, a blown propane burner hooked up to two 40-gallon propane tanks, and a KO wool inside a frame for the top of the furnace. That's it.
Yeah. Really quick, easy, portable.
And when I said I only helped a little bit, I was the guy who picked the frame up and down all the time while they dragged him out and beat the thing on the. Actually, because of what we had, it was the side of the anvil. But
Yeah.
it didn't take much technology to give this a try.
Yeah.
And I don't think there was a problem with that the furnace worked.
It worked really well, I thought.
It
It
worked
heated it
really
up
well.
quick and it held heat.
It held heat. I mean, I'm sure we were throwing kale wool fibers around in ways we wouldn't want to do in production because we didn't line it at all.
Yeah. We're
But it was
outside
out.
in the wind.
It was outdoors in the wind, and we were only going to do it for a few hours in our lives. It was fine, but it wasn't a hard setup to play with. And then we had some of the hammers that are usually used for rail spike driving, right?
Yes.
Yes. No, we
I've
rounded
got a
off the
couple
ends.
purpose-built ones, but yeah, it might have just been rail hammers for that.
Yeah, we may have had a purpose built in a couple of the others or something, but I know, at least I know I brought one of the rail driving ones that I had, but I had, rounded the end off a little bit, of course, and in the end, I think it looks a lot like that thumbnail. Just the thumbnail part, it's about that same size. So we weren't, crazy, but it's a
Yeah.
thing that can be done.
Uh, yeah. And it's one of those, I think I've done 4 experiments now with stacked stretch raising like this. And each one it's gotten a little bit better. And each one I've had to try and figure out different things based on where I was at.
Right.
Like you were saying, it would be really fun to set up a purpose-built hammer and have a nice furnace to try it, but finding time. So
Yes.
it's one of those. I mean, this has been a really good discussion. I think we've covered a lot, and it's one of those. I think it'll be interesting for a lot of people to see the original video that I saw all those years ago. Hopefully, some other people can kind of step up and start playing with this as well, because it would be fun. The guys in Vienna were really welcoming and nice when I got to go up there and visit. I know Aaron Sergel has been up there as well, and he got to see some good stuff and take some good pictures. But we need more people playing with this, I think.
Right. And there was a thread on the Armour Archive where other people were playing around with this too. There was a guy who was pulling some really deep bells out and things like that. So we should look
I
that
hate
up
to
at
say
some
I don't
point.
remember his name, the guy from Canada that came down for
Yeah,
the hammering. Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry, I
exactly.
forgot your name.
But there was a lot of fun work going on up there too. So this isn't just Patrick and a couple of buddies have played with. There have been other people who've been experimenting with this,
Yeah.
and there's certainly similar work going on with several of the armorers over in Europe at this point. Pear is doing things, and Albert is doing things like
Yeah.
this. I've done some little experiments, but I'm just on the edge.
But as far
So
as just the single piece, there I think there's more
yeah,
people playing with that because they're just trying to make a single helmet for a single project more so. But starting out with the
absolutely.
thicker plate, stretching it out into pieces. Yeah. I'd
And
like to play a
even
little bit more with that, but
Yeah, I should. The one reason I haven't played more with that is I haven't bought thick enough material. I only have 1/8 inch, and that's just not thick enough to do anything with.
yeah.
Um, I know that
See,
sounds absurd. I was
part
going
for
to say
me is
that
like,
sounds.
okay, make one or make 5. You
If,
know, I'd rather get
yeah,
5 done. So that's part of my hesitation in one.
I would do the experiments with one for breastplates.
Yeah.
Because you're not going as deep. You don't have to play as crazy about things.
Yes.
And I did an 1/8 inch experiment and did about a 2/3 size breastplate. It was going to be a breastplate for my kid, but he's grown since then. So, well, it's too small for him at this point. An 1/8 inch will work for that, but you need more for really a full size, a good, deep, really entertaining breastplate. Um, I did that one cold, actually. That was crazy, but
Yeah.
but you can do it if you want to. Um,
Yeah.
but it would be fun to do more of that. I just need to get back to it.
Yeah. So real quick before we maybe check out for today, I'm going to grab this piece here. And it's one of those. Can you see it there pretty clear?
It's all black now. I mean, I can
Oh,
see it. There
okay.
you
Let's
go.
tilt it. There we go. So we can get some
There
light
you
on
go.
it. So the original video I was looking for was the Coppersmiths of Santa Clara del Cobre. And they claim to have gained some of their copper working skills from early Spanish missionaries who came over in 1600s or something like that. This is a copper bucket that was made in Santa Clara del Cobre. I'm pretty sure. I can't guarantee that, but they are known for this type of work. This is a pretty early one. This one was actually hammered out on a stone anvil. There are still people making a lot of good stuff. I don't know. Can you see the hammer marks there? Or not the hammer marks, but the dents in it? So
Yeah, those are awful.
this was finished on a stone anvil, and they said they liked the stone anvils because they didn't dissipate the heat as fast. But it's one of those. I'm just going to do a side by side here. the guys in Santa Clara are doing stack stretch raising as well with copper pucks. So they're doing the same process as the guys in Bieno, but they are using copper and they're doing it by hand with sledgehammers. So
Right.
it's fun to watch. And I mean, if you want, that's another video we can sit and discuss. It would be fun to get your insights and talking through that one as well. They also make single piece. So they do stacked and they make these big cauldrons, but they also do single piece where they start out with a big puck of copper and they stretch that into decorative vessels of various sorts. And I've got one of the more decorative pieces as well. And they're interesting to look at. I haven't taken measurements on it. I may have to do that.
Right. And
So
I think the whole business of measurements on these is really interesting so that we can understand what you can do, but it becomes sort of crazy ideas. We're used to, oh, I want to end up with a breastplate that is 070, so I start with a piece of 075, work it a little bit, grind it a little bit, and there I am.
yeah,
This is way more, I'm gonna need material in the middle that's gonna get stretched a lot, so I've got to start with a massive amount there. And I mean, we all know trying to draw out draw out the edge, like, you can knock a dome into something pretty quickly. But if you do it the normal, ordinary, modern dishing way, you end up with a thin middle and a thick edge. And
yeah,
then you try to thin that edge, and it's a real nightmare
yeah,
to try to draw it, continue the depth while trying to, yeah, no, it just doesn't work. So this business of starting with something that is thin on the edge, but has the material where you're going to need it to gain that volume is just a different way of playing with material from the way
yeah,
we normally think about it.
yep,
And I don't think it's weird. I don't think it's strange. I just think we're kooky and we don't think like normal people did until, I don't know, 1950 or something. So
yeah.
it's just not the way we think.
Okay, so I'm going to ask real quick before we sign off. Quick plug for the Acme Armour caliper. Do you have that handy? It's one of
Sure.
those. This is what we've got.
Okay. Now, we have both been showing you thicknesses of the material, um, and we've been showing it in crazy parts of a piece. Looks like there's a reflection that's in the way. Okay, so this is the armor caliper. I'll turn it on. You can zero it out. That's just what the gauge lets you do. Come on, zero out. There you go. But so I've got this crazy shaped, nutty thing here, and I want to know how thick it is in various places. Well, that's 081, 065, 054, 033, and I can even go up to the top and
Can
find out that it's 098 at the top.
can you raise it up a little? Yeah, there we go. It was getting cut off on the bottom of the screen just to show kind of the shape. You can see how convenient this is for being able to get some of these measurements. I mean, this
And
was
since
kind of a collaboration. Well, I think Mac, and I'm not sure who Mac was involved with originally.
Mac designed it, I think Sean Powell did the first casting, prototype casting.
He did a
Um,
3D print, and then I did the first aluminum
Okay, he did
cast off the
3D print,
3D
and you
print.
did the first cast. So Mac had one, and there's a little history on the acmearmorcaliper.com website, showing his crazy wire frame that he had to be real careful and keep from bending every time he tried to use it. But after he did that, and after the first prototype, Mac and Patrick and I ranted for a year probably,
Yeah.
tweaking the shape because I kept trying to get it to go into different helmet shapes. I wanted to measure my burgonet, and there was a little corner here that got in the way and things like that. So we ranted around for shapes, and then Patrick has been nice enough to actually run a run of these things that I, that's the way I can do measurements and provide them on my website for
Yeah.
armor. It's the only way I do it.
And everybody appreciates you sharing those measurements. Um,
I'm happy to.
Real quick, it's one of those. I mean, one of the hopes was that people with real armor could get a hold of these and use them to measure real pieces of armor so that we can gain a better understanding of thicknesses. Um, we sold a batch of them previously, and I was discussing running another batch of them if there's enough interest. But recently, I've got a guy that's coming by wanting to tinker with some armor, make some pieces, and he's working on a black and white helmet, versionette. And just out of curiosity, he started with a piece of 14 gauge, and he did a lot of dishing and sunk the skull rather than trying to raise it because it's an easy way to learn. And out of curiosity, I was like, how much has this thinned? And so we went ahead and took a few measurements, and it dropped so significantly from 14 gauge
I'm
that
going
it
to
was
guess
scary.
03 range.
Probably in there. I would have to.
You're
I
right.
think he took it with him, so I would have to get a hold of it. But it was scary. It's one of those. 14 is definitely not enough if you want to get smacked in the head with a big stick.
Oh
So it
no.
would be worth, if you are an armor, it would be worth having just so you've got a clear understanding of where you're moving the metal and what's happening with it. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a handy item to have.
No, I've been very happy to have it. I do use it on my modern stuff too, but it's the way I get measurements at this point off of my antique pieces, and so that's why I can share them on the website too. So, and you did sell them to a few museums. It was good of them to pick them up. Maybe we'll be getting some accurate measurements out of them someday. Maybe. I
Hopefully,
hope.
yeah,
When I went up to visit Detroit and play with their 15th century bits, they've got some really nice 15th century Helmschmidt bits in a really bad suit that's been displayed for years.
yeah,
But there's some really good pieces. They owned one of the calipers, and so I used it to provide measurements to Chaz. So someday when they report that, the measurements that they come with will have come from that gauge.
yeah.
So
I know Detroit got one. Philadelphia Museum of Art got one, and the Wallace Collection, I think, got one.
was
Or
it
did
either
Toby
Wallace
get
or
one?
yeah,
Maybe
Wallace
just
or
Toby
Toby.
got one.
It may have been Toby. Yeah.
So yeah, there's a few. We'd like to see a few more out there, but I'm gonna let you go. It's been fun. We
It has
will
been.
we will maybe plan to do another one, talk about Santa Clara and some of the interesting things you see there. It's one of those, looking at places that are still doing metal work the same way they were 200-300 years ago is it's insightful.
It's insightful, it's interesting, and it needs to be shared more. That'll be fun. Thank
Okay.
you.